What's going on, everybody? Welcome back at long last to Pro vs. Pro. Can't wait for this entire season. Can't wait for this show. Justin, it's awesome to see you again. How have you been, man?
Man, I'm doing good. Just get through the holiday season with these kids and ready to ramp back up with some golf and some golf talk and see if we can't even just build on our year last year. I know we got more successful as the year went on and looking forward to it. It's going to be fun and it's going to be a fun ride and hopefully we get a bunch of people to come along with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who don't know, the reason we even decided to start this show together is we just felt like we could offer a different spin on PGA shows and golf shows and being able to give some unique insight, 'cause both of us been professional golfers. I know you now have your amateur status back, so I guess you could say we're both washed up professional golfers to some degree. But yeah, I think we can just offer some unique insights, maybe even to the Live and PGA Tour discussion, which we will have a lot of on this show. But at the end of the day, we're just fans of golf, both playing and watching, and we just want to talk shop with all the people watching as well.
Yeah, me being a little bit older, there's a lot of guys out there that are still playing that I've kind of watched grow and play and get better. And as we get into this, most people see that you definitely are more data driven than I am. Both have had our times of being successful in DFS. It's just a different dynamic with us, and it's pretty fun because you get some numbers to kind of back up my thoughts, and then a lot of the recaps are fun of like, hey, you saw this coming this way and didn't see it coming the other way. So, it's a really unique show, and I think that a lot of people will enjoy the different outlooks that we have. That's kind of what we're gonna base everything on, is just a different perspective compared to maybe some other guys that have never been inside the ropes.
Yeah, it's funny how we have such similar backgrounds in the sport of golf, and yet very different approaches to how we bet on golf, how we play DraftKings for golf. So we often get to the same place in very different ways, but we're also not afraid to disagree with each other, which I think is another really fun part of this dynamic. But let's jump in. Live and the PGA Tour. What did you make of Jon Rahm signing? Did it surprise you? And what do you kind of take from it, not just in terms of Rahm, but what does it necessarily mean for the rest of the tour?
Man, I think that, are we even talking about Live right now much at all? If any, if Jon Rahm doesn't sign, like outside of that, they really didn't make much of a splash, which I was kind of surprised by. I do love the quote unquote Q school that they held to give some guys some spots. I think they're going to continue to build on that. But yeah, the Rahm deal, I'm not surprised, to be honest. I think he's kind of accomplished most of what he's wanted to accomplish on the PGA Tour. And I think, with the friends that he has that have moved over to Live and talk to him about it, and just the atmosphere and everything, I think that was the draw. I think there were so many people, some of the older European people that, kind of took the jump into Live, not worried about it, because their careers are definitely, on the backside, so to speak. And now after talking to all of them, they were like, hey man, you need to do this. Like, for the money's good. Like, it's relaxed. We have a great time. It's still competitive. I'm not surprised. And really, I think it just shows that the PGA Tour continues to drop the ball. All they're doing is these discussions and they're saying they're trying to reach an agreement. And Liv is just saying, hey, if you're not going to work with us and we're not going to do this, we're just going to go keep taking your players as their friends come and tell, because after Rahm has a good experience, he's going to tell all of his friends that were on the PGA Tour as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think there's also an angle to approach this with, which is, I believe that Rahm meant everything that he had previously said. Like, he could have taken an enormous payday prior to this season. And he talked about, for him, it's all about the quality of competition. He wants to play against the best. He doesn't like the 54-hole shotgun format, things of those nature. And certainly we know how much the Ryder Cup means to him. I believe all of that. So I kind of think that my biggest takeaway from this is that Rahm at least expects that things are going to change. It's not going to be as, the Live guys are just eliminated from everything, that they've got no chance to play in the things of that nature. I'm pretty sure that he will be on the Ryder Cup team moving forward. I think he has far more exemptions into majors than most did, but I think he knows something that we don't, or at least he expects something that we don't necessarily have an idea of yet, where he doesn't think it's going to be as difficult for him to play the type of schedule that he wants to play moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. They're gonna have to come to some kind of agreement. And the good news is, like, the Ryder Cup is run by the PGA of America, not the PGA Tour. So I think there's going to be a point where they're going to be like, we've had enough anyway. Like, we're going to invite the best players, not what tour they're playing on.
100%. One other thing I want to touch on here is, we're uniquely qualified to talk about the effect of live on golf in general. We're not uniquely qualified to talk about the ethics of live golf or the politics of live golf. So we're just not really going to do that. We're going to talk about what it means for golf, what it can look like for golf, both for the players and for us as fans. So where I want to take this conversation now is, if you were in control of both the PGA Tour and live golf, what would you do in terms of creating tournaments or stuff that kind of blends the two together? Or, my idea is kind of like a Champions League version, where you get PGA Tour events, you get live events, and then you get this like championship series type thing where maybe it's the top 50 PGA Tour earners and the top 10 to 20 live guys and the top 20 Euro Tour guys, or DP World Tour, I should say, guys, all competing together in this like quote unquote Champions series, just like the Champions League in the world of soccer.
So I'd like to be behind doors for their meetings, because I would love to know what Liv's thoughts are on the team aspect. Like, were they doing that to try to be different? And now that those players either really like it or don't care. Does that make sense? So I don't really know if they, what their plan is moving forward if they do come together. And that might be one of the talking points that they're struggling with, is why, do you have to have a team event? Are we going to have a team event? I'd love to see Liv go to a Monday qualifier with 4 guys that make up their own team. Like, I just, how many people would be knocking down the door to do a $500 Monday qualifier to, because again, I was last place like 30-something thousand or something, and it's something ridiculous. So I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that can be done here. I just don't know. I don't know what their plan is. It's a really weird deal of, will they just continue to be 2 separate entities, or will they try to make this, like you said, I've always been pro relegation and delegation, if you want to compare it to European soccer. Like, I've always been for that. And I think the team aspect allows that to happen. So I don't know. It'll be interesting.
I think another key point here is that, as it stands, I think the fear for most golfers, and like I can't speak to the typical golf fan, but I can speak to some casual golf fans. Like, specifically, my dad used to love watching golf almost every single weekend. He would watch probably 20 events per year, something like that, at least tuning in on the weekends. He would watch almost every major and all of the majors. And last year, I don't think he watched a minute of golf outside of the major championships. And so there's definitely at least a group of golf fans who are just turned off by this whole thing. And I think it's because, to this point, the existence of live golf has hurt the overall product of golf. But I do think there's a chance that they can turn it into something special, where it actually enhances the overall golf product, where you can at least like breed some rivalries out of live versus the PGA Tour, things of that nature. So if the PGA Tour and the board of live and all this stuff, if they can come together with a really solid plan, it could turn into something special. I don't think either of us have a whole lot of faith that they're going to be able to do that, though.
It doesn't seem like it. I just think the leadership is so bad. Monahan's so bad. There's just nothing that they can do. I've forever, as long as I can remember, have been, why doesn't golf have a city representation sport like everybody else? Why isn't there a Philly team and a Dallas team and a Phoenix team and a San Antonio team and an Orlando team that, have owners that are willing to put up money and own that team and just basically play it like we did in college, right? You got five player teams, take your 4 best scores, and if you want to have a team aspect, why wouldn't you have that as well as the individual aspect of golf? If I'm the PGA Tour or Live, that's where I would head this conversation into of like, hey, we're going to have our lower tours stay the way they are, but they can be drafted by these other teams. And then, let's say you got 5 guys, so you have 9 guys on your roster, you got 5 guys in case of injury, and you could even do, hey, one guy's playing good, on this lower tour, we're going to call him up and he's going to play for our team, and then the other ones go down. I don't know how that would all look as a business. I just know that I think that that's the way it should work, and in my opinion, just to capitalize if we're going to make golf a team sport.
See, I don't know that you need that drastic of a change here. I don't. So think about Tiger, for example. Like, I think if you're going to a team model, then one of 2 things has to happen. You have to either make the team matter more than the individual, or the individual has to matter more than the team. You can't possibly make them both matter as much as the individual currently matters in golf. So one is going to have to take precedence over the other. I think the magic in golf is the individual, not the team. Like, imagine if Tiger's wins, if his teams didn't win, or would the drama on the 18th hole of Torrey in the U.S. Open on his broken leg, would that drama not have quite existed if his team was up by 15 instead of he has to make that final putt? So I don't know. I think.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to pay players.
Take that drastic of a change.
You're going to have to pay players differently, right? I mean, like Scotty Scheffler is going to make more money than, whoever lower on the list, Eric Cole, who's a really good player, but everybody's going to be paid a different amount and have different. I mean, you got to have bonus structures for winning the individual side of it and all that. Like I said, there's a lot to be done in the business side of that. And if it ever would work, I don't know. But I just think I would be open to, if I were the tour and Live, I would be opening to listening to those kind of talks.
I just think the magic in golf is that you can't depend on anybody else. It has to be you in every single moment. Like in basketball, for example, we've had this conversation before. If you're not having a good shooting night, you can still play really good defense. You can rely on your teammates. You can't do any of that in golf. If you don't have it that day, you just better figure it out, or you better figure out how to make a score out of whatever crap game you have that day. It's what is so incredibly frustrating as a player at times in golf, but it's also, to me, what makes it a magical sport. I don't want to take that away by adding a team aspect where if you're having a bad day, you can just say, all right, my score is probably not going to count today. At least I've got Scotty tearing up the course behind me.
And I honestly think that I wouldn't be opposed to just getting I was originally all for the team. I wouldn't be opposed to getting rid of all of that completely and just going back to the way it was with, hey, you have the top, we're going to start 144 players and you have 4 events. And after those 4 events, your bottom 30 are moving down and your top 30 from the tour below is moving up. And you could do that from the PGA Tour down to the Corn Ferry, down to the Canadian Tour, down to the, all the different, you can do it. You can make it 3 or 4 or 5 levels deep if you wanted to. And I think that would be the best way to do it, in my opinion. But once again, I don't know. The guys at the top are all just looking for about the money. That's all it is. It's all money driven. So they don't care about who's finishing 25th on the Corn Ferry Tour. They just don't.
My guess is that the average fan, the average listener, doesn't have the best sense of what the changes on the PGA Tour have looked like for players. We know what it looks like for fans. We know what it looks like for the best players in the world, like with all these designated events and such. But what about the guys who are just trying to get there? Talk to us a little bit about the changes to Q School that we've seen, the changes to Corn Ferry payouts, all that stuff.
So obviously being a little bit older, I went to Q School back when you could go straight to the PGA Tour. So like top 20 or top 25, you got PGA Tour card. And if you made it to finals, you were guaranteed starts. Right now, guys make it to finals. And if you finish last at finals, you have status, but you're literally just going to still have to play Monday qualifiers. All it does is allow you, if you were to Monday in and make a cut, you can move up into the reshuffle. But they added back to the PGA Tour element this year to where the top 5 at Q School got a PGA Tour card, which I think is an exceptional change. I wish they would go back to 10 at least, and they may. But at least this is a start, and it allows your superstars to, maybe that haven't played their best at the right time, you at least have another chance to do that rather than having to spend a whole year on the Korn Ferry Tour to finish in the top of the money list there and then move up that way. So I'll be interested to see how many starts they get. I don't know how that'll work. I'm sure they'll get, 10 to 20. One of the kids from here finished 4th. His name's Hayden Springer. Really, really cool story. I know Monday Q Info did a story on him as well. He's just a really, really good dude. He works with the same instructor I do here in Dallas. He lives about 15 or 20 minutes down the road. He actually lost his 2-year-old daughter just a couple of months ago, that's a pretty impressive, as mentally exhausting as golf is, to be able to carry that kind of emotion around with you and play that good and make it all the way through and finish top 5 in finals. Pretty impressive.
It's unbelievable. And I think one of the benefits to this entire live situation is that the tour has given like a minimum earnings to Korn Ferry Tour guys, and they've given like a miscut stipend, I think is what they called it, to guys who Monday qualify into events, all of which is helping the guys who are just trying to make it in the golf world. It just helps them from a financial perspective, so that we get more stories like Springer of guys who otherwise they might have had to give up chasing the dream a year ago, 2 years ago. We never would have, heard their names in the golf world. We never would have seen them eventually get the success that they deserved so much to have. So there is that benefit of all this. And to your point earlier, where it's like, the PGA Tour has really screwed things up along the way. As a player, when you suddenly learn that you're getting this much more money, you're first like happy, you love that, and then you say, hey, wait a minute, why did they need to get their cards to be completely shown before they were able to do this for us? They should have been doing this already. They obviously had the money to do it. And so as a player, it's really hard to trust that the PGA Tour is always going to have your back, which then, of course, makes it more likely that when presented with an opportunity to go to live golf, players are going to take it. So I think you make a really, really good point that the tour is responsible for so much of what's happening, not just because of the way they've handled it from the start, but also just their general practices before all of this drama started that now make players question, were they ever really behind us to begin with?
So I talk about this a lot with work, after starting a company a couple of years ago and watching growth, is forward thinking. You have to be forward thinking. And in their business model, they weren't. They never thought about anything going forward. They only thought about, how much money they were making right then and how they were, how much money they could continue to pay themselves, instead of looking down the road of like, hey, let's plan out for the next couple of years to keep everybody happy and to keep things going forward, to keep the company, the brand growing. A lot of what you said just reminded me of the Chris Stroud story where, man, I'm sure you saw a little bit of it on Twitter. So he's about my age. We turned pro the same time. Man, we played several practice rounds for Monday qualifiers together. He was really good. Played at Lamar, I think, and down in the Houston area. Great player. Obviously been on the PGA Tour for a long time. And you have half of Twitter saying, oh, why is he complaining and going to live Q School? What does the PGA Tour owe him? Well, think about, he only made so many cuts or whatever, and he still made he still made a couple $1 million for sure. But the other side of that is now all of a sudden, all those miscuts, they're paying these people for that, how much do they owe him for that, where he was traveling to support? And then they'll be like, and then somebody will come back with, well, you could replace him with anybody on the Korn Ferry Tour and the fans would never know. Sorry, Chris Stroud's really, really good. He was an All-American. Like he's a really good player. It just shows you how good the top of, the people at the top really are. So he's not replaceable. And it's a stupid for all these people to think about that or to say that. Now, there are a few people that are good enough to be out there, but he's earned that right. So I'm completely on Stroud's side. I know he went to the Live Q School deal. I don't think he played very good. So I don't know what his plans are going forward.
And just because he's replaceable doesn't mean that the tour shouldn't still have his back to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Like he's still part of the players that make the tour as successful as it is.
For sure. And it's just mind-boggling, the people that don't have any clue, that have never done it, and he's got a family. You can look out for your family, right? You want to make the money that you think you should be paid, and he just didn't feel like it was fair, which I'm not going to disagree with him. I think he 100%, has done everything right throughout his career to be paid more money. That being said, he made a lot of money. So,
yeah, there's also an aspect to it that, like, some of the players who are taking money from Live, it's like, how much is enough, right? Like, you're already making an absurd amount. Is it really going to change your life in the way I can't remember who exactly it was. It may have even been Rom at some point, who was like, if I take this money, it's not going to change my life in any meaningful way. There are players who are going to the Live Q School or taking deals early on where it actually did make a huge difference in their life, this amount of money they're getting. So I think at least, like, my grandparents, for example, have taken a very anti-player stance that, if a player goes to Live, they've just, like, completely compromised all their morals. They made this horrible decision. I can't root for them ever again. To some degree, I understand it, and I do hold that decision against some of the players pretty considerably, but I also think you can't just make them the only victim or the only villain here. The PGA Tour is as responsible, if not more responsible, for so many players leaving as the players themselves.
How much of the money they're being paid is a pride factor? So it goes to the same thing for, like, and I'll give you an example. Obviously, I'm a huge Ranger fan. We had a great year, and everybody talked about signing Ohtani, right? Well, his contract and the way that it's paid out, if you look at California taxes compared to Texas taxes, we could have paid him less money and he would have made more money. But how much of the pride factor of being the highest paid baseball player was in that? I think that's pretty much all it is, right? Is you're just want to be known as getting paid the most money.
Yeah, I think that could absolutely be part of it. Like, this past season, maybe Rom felt like, oh, damn, Scotty's kind of taken over as the guy that everyone views as the best player in the world. But if I'm making $600 million and he's not, can anyone say that I'm not the prize in the golf world now? Of course, by that logic, Tiger could sign tomorrow and be the best player in the world again. So obviously it's not true to the nth degree, but I think you make a good point that, ego, pride here can certainly be involved as well. Anything else on the Live and PGA kind of relations at this point before we talk about this week's Tournament of Champions?
Well, I think it's a good segue into this week is the ROM. Like I sent this text to you earlier. I was like, it's so weird looking at this event and preparing without Jon Rahm. Like, for him to not be playing here is it's just different. You got no Rory, no Rahm. And then, does that kind of hurt this event to not have two of the superstars in it?
Yeah, we got so accustomed last season to kind of having this big three at the top, and it's not a big three anymore. And I absolutely think it changes a lot. And we actually see that in our models as well, where Scotty is now so far ahead of everybody else in the win probability. I also, I need to rerun the simulation because we ran the simulation earlier with Rory in. He is out of this field, skipping it once again. But Scotty was already winning 13.5% of the time in our simulations. That's going to go up without Rory. So this could get nutty. I don't expect to find value on Scotty in the betting market at all. I kind of think this event as a whole, these players are mostly just priced out of consideration in the outright market. But I'm curious your thoughts there as well.
Man, I think that everybody that's watched knows that I'm not a big favorite person. I'm always looking for somewhere down to get an edge somewhere else. That being said, like I saw some European markets were offering Scheffler at close to 8-1.
Mhm.
I don't know how you don't play that. And it would be one of those deals where I think there's a lot that goes into that. You're coming off a big break. You know that he has the talent and the work ethic to not let the break affect him very much. He won the last time out in a very similar type of spot. The putting stuff that he's working on, what I think is great is, he started working with Phil Kenyon and it obviously paid off at the Hero where he killed everybody, but it gave him something to work on, something to grind on throughout the winter. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that. If I could see him here in an 8 to 9, 10-1 market, like I wouldn't be afraid of him. I think there's value there because I think I kind of look at it as, does Scotty Scheffler win this event 1 out of 8 times? Yes, he does for sure in this current situation, because there's also so many guys that haven't played in so long.
How do you handle that aspect of it? Because when we're in the middle of a season, we have such fantastic, robust data on exactly how every guy is playing. Our models here at FTN, we look at recent form, not just as a whole. Like we're not just saying, oh, this guy has gained 2 strokes per round in his last 5 events or something like that. We have each strokes gained category off the tee, approach, around the green, and putting predicted by a different time frame based on what is most predictive for that specific strokes gain category. So in season, like that's fantastic. But when you're not in season, can you just take the same amount of rounds and apply it? Or do you have to say, you know what, this guy was really bad to end the season, but what if we get his form at the beginning of the season instead, and kind of take a more subjective route to predicting golfers to begin the year?
So I'm always pretty subjective on the way that I do all of this anyway. So I'm going to, outside of your superstars, like I think your superstars, and I talk about this a lot, like I think that your top tier, your top 20 players in the world are going to be your top 20 players in the world. They're going to take a little bit less time to get into the season. I think that lifestyles matter, right? If a guy hasn't played in 4 months, he's got 3 kids and they went, snow skiing, and they haven't, they spent the holidays and he hasn't been practicing. I think it takes guys like that a little bit longer to move in. Like my edge is like Cantlay, right? He hasn't played since the Ryder Cup. He's the one that's hard for me to figure out because I do believe he's an elite player, but that's a long time to not play a golf tournament. So, he's the one that I question. Like that's kind of the edge for me. Like anybody below him that has taken a lot of time off, I'm going to tend to work against. Whereas, the guys that are hungry, that they know they need to play well early, that, have so. And then also we do have some course. I think course history here matters a bunch too, because we do have some history. I think that it matters here than a lot of other courses because it shows how they come off of a layoff.
That's an interesting point to it. I'm going to disagree with one thing that you said, where I don't necessarily care so much about when a player has played last, because I think there can be advantages to taking lots of time off. You can, address something that was kind of hurting you all season. Like, for example, I think Scotty is far more likely to putt well this week than he was in pretty much any week on tour, because now he's actually had the time to really figure out what the source of the issue is, instead of just trying to put a Band-Aid on it every single week. And so I think you do get some guys who can benefit from that time off. We also don't know. We can't possibly know how hard a guy has been practicing leading up to the week. So there's a lot there where I think my approach to it is I'm just going to weigh the recent form, quote unquote, as like the last 10 rounds, last 20 rounds, things of that nature, less than the long-term form for all these guys. And especially in relation to how I would typically do that in the middle of the season, where long-term is going to matter just more for me than it usually does. And short-term will matter less for me than it usually does.
Yeah. And there's how many people are out there, with their family treating it as a vacation, and how many guys are out there like hungry to get back out there and compete. I don't know the answer to that either, right? That there's a lot to, I would guess that if I was one of the best players in the world, then I'd be like, hey, kids, we're going to Hawaii for a week, and I'm not going to be hitting balls after I get done playing like I would in most weeks when I'm traveling by myself and that kind of deal. So there's some of that to it, but they also know it's work. So that, there's a lot of people that treat it as work. And those are the guys that I think will be successful this week.
Well, not only that, but once you get inside the ropes, you might be there with your family, but you're still probably going to be focused for those 18 holes. And all of these guys are so talented that on any given day, as long as they're focused inside the ropes, they could put together a really good round. And so, again, like I think it's a mistake to try and bet this event or to try to play DraftKings for this event based solely on what you think the player's motivation level is, what you think he's been doing in preparation for this event. More often than not, I think talent is going to win and course fit is going to win. And speaking of course fit, we do have a stronger than usual course fit model for this event because we have changed the way we are running the course fit model. We now have, so in the past, what we were doing is we were kind of looking at a player's entire body of work at a course and then using his entire strokes game profile over that amount of time. So, maybe since 2017 or something, to then use that to predict how they have done, which translates to the course fit model. Now what we're doing is we're looking at every single instance of a player playing at the course. And we're also not just taking like who that player was in the entire 7 years to use that prediction, but we're actually looking at what was his recent form at the time, what was his expected off the tee at the time, what was expected putting at the time, and just making this really, really reliable, powerful model. So it's the exact same thought process, it's the exact same concept of the course fit model. We're just now executing it in a much better way. And as a result, we have a more powerful model than we've ever had at this golf course. 41% of the weight is off the tee. We have around 27% to each approach and around the green, and then a very, very small weight to putting here. How does that line up with your kind of prior thoughts on Kapalua?
Yeah, I mean, the fairways are huge. That being said, if you hit it out of that fairway, if we get a bunch of wind and you hit it out of that fairway, it's very penal, right? So you have it makes me lean to, and then obviously I think short game matters a lot. I think you have to chip it really good. You have to have a lot of imagination. You get some tight lies. My first thought is this is a Jordan Spieth type of place. Because he hits it far, and it seems like his misses aren't generally the big misses. Like he hits a lot of, like at a tighter, harder golf course, he hits a lot of shots just out of the fairway. He doesn't hit the one that's just way offline very often, although a couple years ago he got the snap hooks pretty bad. So, I lean to guys like that. Finau, all the same type of stuff that you're talking about. But I want a guy that hits it far and doesn't have the really big miss.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I want to point out, I just reran the simulations with no Rory McIlroy. We have Scheffler at 14.6% to win now. You mentioned seeing him 800 to 1 in some places. That's an 11.1% implied win probability. So if you can get that 800 to 1, that's a very solid bet. Where I have seen him more often than not is around 500, which is 16.7% implied win probability. So I won't be placing any bets on Scotty unless I can find something around 700, I think is a good break-even point. But as I said earlier, like for me, this is one of those events where I think what the books typically do is they say, oh man, there are so few players in this event that we got to really slash the odds for everybody. When in reality, the top end of this field would make a strong top end of a 100-person field, 120-person field. And so I don't think the win equity is changing a whole lot based on the fact that you don't have another 80 players tacked onto the bottom of this field who aren't anywhere near as good as the guys who earned their way into this event. So I think the books are adjusting more than the actual win odds adjust. So it's unlikely that I will have any bets this week. Maybe I'll find one or two. But if I do, we will put those in the Discord and we'll put them in our bet tracker at ftnbets.com. for the time being, no bets. And I think that's how the week is going to end up for me.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, especially when you can play as much DFS as you want to play and get your leverage there. I'm a big believer in you don't have to force anything. I saw there's a couple of matchups that I really like here. I'm with you. I don't want to force anything. That being said, I did see they had I don't know if they have this on any of your books, but basically it's like 8 guys to win, and it was like minus 110. So you basically get the top of the field at to me, if you were ever going to do that, this would be a field where you could do that, where you get a Scheffler, a Morikawa, a Schauffele all together to win.
FanDuel has an interesting one, which is they have the regular just outright market. Then they also have winner without Morikawa, Hebert, Homa, Scheffler, and Hovland. So the top of that list is Cantlay at plus 850, then Schauffele at 10-1, Fitzpatrick, Spieth at 14-1 each, so on and so forth. We're basically saying, we know you don't want to bet the top names. Can we entice you to bet these other names if we throw those out the window? I remember watching, one of my really good buddies in the industry, Jeff Feinberg, on Pat Mayo's show last year. He would talk like every single episode of just, if Scheffler, or I think at the time it was Rahm, he was like, if Rahm's in the field, I'm not betting anybody else because Rahm's going to win. And so I think people are starting to think that way about Scotty and about Hovland. And so this is an interesting market, and it'll be especially interesting to see if they do more of it. I would kind of be really interested if they do, because given our strokes gain projections, given the way that we are estimating variance for players and the way that we can simulate these events, we might have a real big edge if this is a more common thing that sportsbooks do throughout the season. So very interested to see if they will continue to do this or not.
Yeah, this one, it's minus 110, and you get Scheffler, Hovland, Morikawa, Cantlay, Homa, Schauffele, and Hebert.
It's crazy.
So, I just think that if you're going to get an event like this, I feel like there's some value in that, just because you got to think you're getting Scheffler, and like you said, he's 5-1 just by himself. So you give me the next 6 best players or close to it, and not decrease the odds by that much. And then the only other thing I really like is Morikawa over Cantlay. Cantlay coming off the long layoff. I feel like Morikawa should have been a favorite here anyway, but they were both minus 110, and I just feel that would be the next. That's the only matchup that really stood out to me.
And it's interesting you say that, because it kind of shows how different our approaches are for this week in particular, where if you're just looking at the simulation data, we have Cantlay finishing top 20 67% of the time. We have Morikawa finishing top 20 55% of the time. Top 10 for Cantlay's 42% of the time. Morikawa's 32%. So you're really taking this approach of Cantlay's not going to be the player that we typically see this week. The books aren't factoring that in. I'm going to take Morikawa as a result, whereas I'm more inclined to just approach it from a data perspective, not really use that subjectivity. And if anything, I don't think that I would bet Cantlay here, but I also wouldn't bet Morikawa either.
Yeah, I just think that also, I think this golf course is better for Morikawa anyway, in my opinion. I don't know that that's necessarily shown, but that's just what I think that the end game should be. So we talk about this a lot, and people will hear about this a lot throughout the year, is being ahead of the curve, especially in DraftKings, right? You want to beat the rest of the field to a guy. And that's kind of where I think that you can beat the rest of the field on a Morikawa against Cantlay right here, just because I think Morikawa is a better player in general. And he's been better lately too.
Speaking of trying to be ahead of the curve, one of the ways I want to close out the show this week is kind of taking a broad view of the year as a whole. Can we pinpoint a handful of players that we think are going to really outperform their past performance throughout this season? Hopefully not the obvious candidates like Hebert, for example. Let's try to get a little bit more off the board than that. But who are some names that come to mind for you in terms of potential to have a breakout year?
I think Cam Davis has a really big year this year. He's the main one that I think that I want to try to be ahead of the curve of. I wouldn't be surprised if he won this week. It's a perfect golf course for him. He's played good before here. He's the one that I think will translate into kind of playing all golf courses good and not so much of just a bomb and gouge type of player.
The guy that I'm going to go to is Eric Cole. And for anyone who knows me, anyone who has listened to my golf analysis for a while, you probably know that the thing that I love the most is off the tee performance. So Cole's a bit of a surprise because he does everything extremely well except off the tee performance. What makes him such an interesting candidate to me is the fact that he has a chance to develop the skill that I think is the easiest to develop, which is driving distance. Like, you can spend as much time as you want on a putting green. You're not guaranteed to actually improve your putting by doing so. Same thing with short game, same thing with iron play. If you get in the gym, if you decide I want to add 5 miles per hour on my driver swing, you can do that. No matter who you are, you can do that. And some people might counter with, yeah, but if you do that, maybe you ruin your swing and suddenly you're not accurate. Well, guess what? Eric Cole's accuracy off the tee is already horrendous. I don't think it can get much worse than that. So if he just improves a little bit, if he becomes like an average player off the tee, he has a chance to make a dramatic leap into one of the premier players in the world. I can see him having the type of career path that Cam Smith had, where all of a sudden it's like, he had always been good enough with his irons. He'd always had this fantastic short game, always been a good putter. Cole has all that. He just has to become competent off the tee, and he'll be able to contend in any event. So I think Cole has a real chance to do that. Now, I don't know that he's been in the gym working on his driving distance. I don't know that he's been working on his driving at all, but I know that the chance exists for that to happen. And it's nice when a player just has one thing that they have to improve on to make a dramatic leap with their game. Because remember, when you drive the ball poorly, you're consistently putting yourself behind the 8 ball. If he drives the ball better, it's not just that he makes up that ground of what he had previously been losing off the tee, but he also then puts himself in position more often to take advantage of what his strengths currently are.
And people that are going to continue to listen to the show are going to realize that both of us are probably what we agree on the most is the necessity of driving the golf ball. Mm-hmm. I think that is by far what we agree on every time this conversation comes up is if you're going to bet on somebody or whatever, that you need them to drive the ball well.
Yep.
And I agree 100% about Eric Cole. That's a great call. He was on my list to talk about. He kind of reminds me of Matt Fitzpatrick a little bit. Just that same idea of, and then, he got in the gym and started hitting it really far. And now the weeks that he drives it good, he contends. There's a couple of Texas kids that I think play good this year. Taylor Moore and Davis Riley. I think they both have good years. And then the other one is that Norman kid is maybe from Sweden, Vincent Norman. Mm-hmm. I think he'll have a good year that nobody's going to talk about.
I like that call. A name no one's going to be surprised to hear me say is Luke List. I'm bringing him up specifically because we actually saw some real progress putting in kind of the off season where, he won the Sanderson Farms in October, gaining 1.4 strokes per round putting, which I believe was his highest since let's see. When he won the Farmers Insurance in 2022, he only gained 1.3. So there's a chance that was his best putting performance ever. And, if we could just see, again, it's like the opposite of Eric Cole. If he can just become competent putting where he can have a positive week once a month instead of twice a year, that will mean he can contend once a month instead of twice a year. So List is somebody to watch for, not because I think he's going to break out. It's not like he's somebody who's going to be a completely different golfer where his ball striking reaches and the next level. It's just he has one skill set that he has to turn around. If he's able to do it, his game as a whole is going to be infinitely better.
So on that same trajectory, do you think Lucas Glover continues with the improved putting and has another solid year? Or do you think that's kind of run its course?
I think more than anything else, Glover is perfect example of what Luke List could be this year, where it's not like we think that Lucas Glover is this completely different player. It's just, hey, he was ball striking really well, which he had always previously been able to do, but then he was actually finally making some putts to go along with it and had this fantastic run. Since that run ended, since he won at both the Wyndham and the St. Jude, he definitely hasn't played the same quality of golf. So I would be more inclined to say he's probably somewhere in the middle, where we won't see him struggle with the putter for the duration of time that we had previously seen, but I also don't expect him to come out making a ton of putts like he was. And obviously the putting was fueling the ball striking, right? Like he was just soaring with confidence, and that was helping him stay hot with the irons and such. So I'd be surprised if we see him reach the same highs that we saw him reach last year, but I also expect that he won't reach the lows that he saw in the past previous seasons, and not just last year as well.
So, all right, yeah, and I agree with all that. Let's just lead into the one other guy that I wanted to mention that's kind of in that same boat as Zalatoris. I mean, we saw how bad he went to the broomstick, and it didn't look very good to me. He's always kind of struggled with short putts, but people don't realize how good he was from 10 to 20 feet for a long time with the short putter. Do you think you just kind of accept the struggle from short and just continue doing what you're doing and holding all those 10 to 20 footers? Because as we've talked about a lot, if you're going to shoot really low numbers, that's where you're going to be making those putts from anyway.
It's so interesting with him because I think his putting has hurt him so much more in your typical event than in the really difficult events like major championships, where he's knocked on the door of winning so often, where if he just wants to get in the win column, he has to change the way he putts. But it's almost more important for him to just make sure that he remains one of, if not the best ball strikers in the world moving forward. And if you spend too much time trying to fix this one issue, we've talked about it a lot. Like it's only a matter of time before struggles on the green seep into your long game, especially if you're devoting so much of your practice time that was previously going to your long game on fixing that one aspect of your game. So it's a dangerous game to go all in trying to fix that, but he may have to if it continues to be this big of a problem. But he's also mentioned the fact that, like, look, it looks a lot worse than the results have actually been. And so anytime he does miss a short putt, it's like people look at it like, of course he does. Look at the stroke of his putter. He can't even put it in a straight line. But there are other players on tour missing those putts, and he's not missing significantly more of those than most of the field. I was actually surprised to see that he had gone to such a change with that putter because of that.
Yeah, so this offseason, I get to play at the club he's a member at here, and he actually has been working with Josh Gregory on short game stuff and putting, and I saw him out there. So I know Josh really well, have for a long time, and I've actually got to we sat down after getting done playing one day and talked for a while with Will, and super good dude. Can't say enough about. He's just a regular old guy, just like the rest of us. And I mean, he seems like, from what he was saying, feels pretty good. His body, has recovered well from the surgery, and he's ready to start playing. It's just amazing to me, like watching him on the putting green out there, of not seeing any of that. And then you get him under the gun and how much it just changes everything and how the body reacts to that.
Last guy, the people need to know how we feel about Siwoo Kim for this upcoming season. Where are you on Siwoo's game?
I think he wins next week. So there's your bold prediction of what I think. I don't know if this is public or not, but he's got a baby coming. So he will, I think the baby's due in March. So we'll see how he handles that. Also, do you think that it's any weight off of his shoulders winning that, whatever that deal was in Japan or whatever, where they won and now he doesn't have to go to the military? Like, is that a big, deep breath for him of like, hey, I don't have to worry about that anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll kind of answer this addressing both of those things. First of all, congratulations coming up to Siwoo Kim. But his issue has always been a mental issue, right? It's being able to stay composed and poised. And when he makes a few bad swings, not letting that spiral into a bunch more bad swings, but finding a way to turn it around and just stay level throughout events. So, yeah, I think maybe part of the reason why he was always struggling to stay composed like that was because he had this weight on his shoulder of, maybe he needs to go win a major championship so he doesn't have to go do that service. Now that's off his back. So maybe we see a more subdued Siwoo Kim because of that. And maybe we see a more subdued Siwoo Kim because having a child grounds him. So either way, like I almost think both, they can only work in one direction. They can only help him because we know so specifically what his issue has been. He's got enormous talent. If he can channel that and use his emotions to stay focused and stay motivated instead of letting things spiral out of control when he makes one or two bad swings, that's going to be really, really good for him. So I'm optimistic now. When I previously would have said I don't think we have any reason to believe anything will change, but it's a good call out on getting that weight lifted off of his shoulders, and then also maybe having a baby will actually really help him just stay grounded and take a different mental approach to the game.
Yeah, and I know he's been, he spent some time with Chris Como this winter working on stuff, and then his wife actually is probably comparatively a better golfer than he was. I mean, she played on the Korean LPGA, which makes a lot more money than the LPGA here, mm-hmm. and all their events are fairly close, and she's really good. So there's going to be some golf pedigree in that kid for sure.
Definitely, no doubt about that. Final thing that I want to note, you and I now have a joint entry in the Mayo One and Done contest. Everybody listening should go join that. You pick one golfer every single week. You can only use a player once throughout the season. Your score is the amount of money that the player wins in that event. So there's a ton of strategy about it. Justin and I will be breaking it down every single week. We'll talk through the strategy of who we're picking, why we're picking. We'll ask that you don't just tail us every single week, but you can listen to the several or handful of guys that we're debating early in the week and make your decision based off of that. Regardless, it'll be fun for both of us and along with all of you to kind of sweat that contest throughout the season. Check my Twitter at AlexBlickle1 for that link. And you can also go to Pat Mayo's Twitter at the PME to find that link as well. Thank you all for tuning in. This is going to be one hell of a season. We can't wait. Thanks for watching us each week, and let's have a blast all year. We'll catch you next time.